In this video, I'm going to explain the difference between a foam polishing pad and a microfiber polishing pad, and when to use one over the other and why. Coming up. What's up everyone, this is Luke Wilson and welcome to the Wilson Auto Detailing YouTube channel. Now the subject of today's video is foam versus microfiber polishing pads. Now in front of me I have two different foam pads and I have two different microfiber pads. Now in order to explain the difference and why to use one over the other, I want to start with foam polishing pads. What are foam polishing pads? When do you use them? Why? And what are they best for? Now the two specific foam pads that I have in front of me right now is the orange 6.5 inch Griot's Garage correcting foam pad and the yellow Chemical Guys Hexalogic heavy cutting foam pad. Now the first and most obvious probably benefit of a foam pad is that foam bends and contours to the shape of the panel that you're polishing. So unlike something like wool or even a stiffer microfiber polishing pad, foam bends and you can really get foam to polish any sort of surface because it's just going to conform to whatever surface it's on. Another huge benefit to foam is that it's very, very gentle on the paint. Though this is labeled a heavy cutting pad, foam in a lot of ways is replacing a wool pad for a lot of detailers because it's just so much more gentle on the paint. It really doesn't create the swirls and things like that that wool pads often do, and then detailers have to follow up with a DA polisher and a foam pad. Foam can also be used on not only a dual action random orbital polisher, but also on a rotary polisher. So foam pads are very, very versatile, but there's also a ton of options when it comes to foam polishing pads. So this yellow heavy cutting pad is just one example of an entire series that Chemical Guys has regarding foam polishing pads. For example, they have a green, a blue, a red, an orange, and all of those colors represent different situations. Heavier cutting, medium cutting, lighter cutting, finishing polishes, things like that. And of course this is Griot's Garage orange correcting pad. So this is going to be a heavier cutting, a foam pad that's more designed for paint correction purposes. Now in addition to all of that, foam polishing pads tend to last for a very long time. Because the foam is completely uniform and the same throughout the entire depth of this polishing pad, as it wears down, you can still use the same polishing pad. They tend to last a long time and still give great results even after they've been really worn in. Now foam polishing pads are measured in something called PPI, which stands for pores per square inch. And the higher the PPI number, meaning the more pores per square inch, the finer the foam is gonna be, meaning that it's a foam pad more dedicated to finishing purposes, maybe to sealing or waxing purposes. And of course the opposite is true. The lower the pore per square inch number, the more heavy cutting, heavy abrading the foam polishing pad is going to do. Now one thing foam pads are really famous for is offering a very even dispersion of pressure as the pad is on the paint, correcting or finishing the paint surface. In other words, because the foam is so malleable, when you're putting any sort of pressure on it, that pressure tends to be really dispersed throughout the surface area of the entire pad, so that one side is not necessarily being more aggressive than the other depending on how you're pushing. There's a very even flow of friction and pressure. And this is good because it allows for a very even flow of the product that you're applying. Whether it be a sealant or a polish, it allows the polish to be dispersed very evenly. And not only that, but because foam works much like a sponge does, a lot of people argue that foam pads actually allow for a little bit of polish to go a long way. Because the polish so stays in the foam and the spongy surface, it allows for a little bit of polish to be used on a whole lot of surface area because it's not used up so quickly, much like it is on a wool pad. Foam pads are also very, very easy to wash with a pad washer, and not only that, but they also tend to get less dirty than microfiber polishing pads do because they don't have any fibers holding any of the polish, so the polish tends to sink inside of the sponge and the foamy surface, so that even if you didn't necessarily wash or season the pad every single time you went to reapply, really that would be an okay approach because the polish so gets embedded in the foam, it tends to stay much cleaner. Now let's go ahead and get into microfiber polishing pads. Now in front of me, I have two different microfiber polishing pads. One is the fast cutting microfiber pad from Griot's Garage, and one is the fast finishing microfiber and foam interface polishing pad by Griot's Garage. Now, microfiber is a fairly newer innovation, and microfiber really has gained a reputation as a good paint correcting, heavy cutting, heavy abrading type of polishing pad. Now the big question is, why does a microfiber polishing pad tend to correct paint or correct paint imperfections quicker and with better results than a foam pad does? Well, the microfiber fibers that exist on this pad tend to grab the paint less than a foam pad does, and so that allows the pad to actually spin and rotate at a faster pace, and so of course that would translate directly into quicker paint correction, because of course the faster the pad can spin, the more friction that's going to be caused between the pad and the paint, and the higher the temperature is going to get as that polish and that pad is correcting the paint defects. So the faster that can spin, the faster it's going to correct paint, and at the end of the day, that's going to allow microfiber pads to correct paint to a greater degree, do some heavier paint correction than foam pads. Now, microfiber polishing pads are very, very versatile in that they can cut through incredible paint imperfections on a DA polisher. And so a lot of the industry is actually moving much more towards dual action polishers rather than rotary because of the incredible advanced technology that we have. DA buffers coupled with microfiber polishing pads are really able to accomplish some pretty incredible paint correction. So in order to kind of dissect microfiber polishing pads a little bit more and how they're different from foam polishing pads, I really want to use these two Griot's Garage microfiber polishing pads as an example because they really represent a lot of the majority of how these pads are kind of being made. So number one, this microfiber polishing pad has a foam interface, and this does a couple things. Number one, this is called their fast finishing pad. So obviously by the title we know that it's for a finishing type of job. So this is just going to be applying sealants, maybe a last step polish, things like that. This is a finishing pad. Now the foam interface not only allows the pad to kind of conform and contort to the face of whatever part of the door you're putting it on, just like a regular foam pad does, but it also decreases kind of the friction and the pressure that's being put on the pad. So obviously this isn't going to correct quite as heavy paint imperfections as something like this fast cutting pad is going to. This is a fast cutting pad. It has no foam interface and it's completely microfiber faced right here. So any pressure that I put down onto my buffer, my DA buffer while this pad is on it, that pressure is being completely put on the car. Whereas something like this finishing foam pad has a lot of like shock absorbency value, and so it makes this pad much more forgiving than something like this. So this pad is much more geared towards like an experienced, kind of more skilled detailer who knows what he's doing when he's polishing, and this is a much better thing to start on when you're like a beginner. There's actually an inch of foam layer, so it's just a very, very forgiving pad. Now, as a last kind of just general point regarding microfiber polishing pads, they do require a little bit more cleaning than a foam polishing pad does, because obviously the foam is kind of like a sponge where it can absorb the polish and you don't necessarily have to clean it as regularly as you're using it, whereas something like this, the polish really doesn't have anywhere to go besides in between the fibers, so it's much easier to kind of gunk this up and make it kind of wad up. So you're definitely going to want to use like compressed air while you're polishing with a pad like this, because the compressed air is just going to disperse those fibers and kind of break them up. And of course a pad washer can be used both with a foam and microfiber pads, but the pad washer really reacts well with foam pads, at least from my experience. So guys, in conclusion, a couple just like generalities that you can kind of make about foam and microfiber polishing pads is that microfiber polishing pads are going to be more reserved for heavy duty paint correction. the more serious paint imperfections, paint defects, you're gonna reserve your microfiber polishing pads for those. Whereas foam pads, yes, this, for example, is a heavy cutting foam pad, but foam pads, for the most part, are kind of gonna be reserved for the more light to medium paint correction or paint enhancement. But of course, both have their place. I think for every professional detailer out there, there definitely needs to be a good mix of both, because in different situations, they just require different measures to be taken. So when you have the ability to choose between microfiber and foam, it just really extends your reach that you're able to have as a professional detailer. And once again, like Wilson Auto Detailing, you can just give superior results. So guys, that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video and it helped you, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or video ideas or advice, make sure to hook those up in the comment section below. And of course, if you'd like to buy any of these polishing pads, then I'm gonna put a link to Amazon to all of these specific pads in the description box below. And guys, remember, some of the best video ideas and advice comes from you guys, the Wilson Auto Detailing community. So thanks so much for watching. Keep giving superior results, and from Luke here at Wilson Auto Detailing, I will see you guys in the next video.